They say history is written by the victors, but what about the books that were never meant to be read at all? The Codex Gigas, the most cursed book ever written, bound in darkness and blood, isn't just another relic locked away behind museum glass. It's a challenge, a temptation, a shadow that has stretched across nearly 8 centuries without fading. This isn't simply a medieval manuscript, it's a forbidden medieval book that blurs the line between salvation and damnation. And once you hear its story, you'll understand why some believe it doesn't just record history, it rewrites yours. Picture it, a book so massive it dwarfs any other of its age, whispered to be bound in human skin, containing the Bible, ancient medical knowledge, exorcisms, and the largest portrait of the devil ever inked. Legends say it was written in a single night after a monk made a pact with something far from human. Whether you believe that or not, the Devil's Bible has left a trail of unsettling coincidences, escaping fires, surviving wars, and always finding a new keeper as if it refuses to die. But here's the paradox that unsettles even the skeptics. If this darkest book ever written is truly cursed, why does no one dare destroy it? Why, for centuries, has it been protected, preserved, even cherished? Could it be because its real power isn't in the ink or the parchment, but in what it does to the mind of whoever dares to open it? And that's where things get dangerous. Because the most cursed book in history might not just be a relic from the past, it might be alive, patient, and waiting. The question is, are you willing to turn the page, knowing it might already be turning yours? Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to hold something that shouldn't exist? The Codex Gigas, often called the Devil's Bible, isn't just another dusty relic in a museum. It's the most cursed book in history. People say it's a cursed medieval manuscript, but that description barely scratches the surface. This forbidden medieval book feels less like an object and more like a presence, a weight in your hands that you can't explain. Some claim that simply being near it is enough to stir something deep in your subconscious, like a shadow brushing the edge of your thoughts. And if a book can make you feel that way, what exactly is living inside its pages? Every book tells a story, but the book bound in human skin tells yours, whether you want it to or not. The moment your eyes meet the ink, it's as if the Devil's Codex is sizing you up, deciding whether you're a reader or a victim. Scholars call it the darkest book ever written. But scholars don't usually talk about the way it feels alive, as if it's holding something back from you, or waiting for the right moment to let it out. Have you ever had an old photograph or family heirloom that seemed to carry an energy all its own? Imagine that, multiplied 100-fold. Picture this, a lone monk in the candlelit silence of a stone cell. The hour is late, and the air feels heavy, almost electric. He's not just writing, he's pouring something out of himself and into the parchment, something no prayer could absolve. The mysterious medieval manuscript begins to take form, its Latin lines flawless, its pages immense. Each stroke of the quill feels deliberate, as though he's copying from a source only he can see. And yet, as the legend whispers, he's not alone in that room. Some say the medieval occult book has an almost magnetic pull. You don't find it, it finds you. That sounds like superstition until you hear how it survived centuries of war, fire, theft, and political upheaval, always ending up in the hands of someone willing to keep it safe. Or maybe safe isn't the right word. Maybe it's more accurate to say they were chosen, and not always in ways they understood. Have you ever noticed how some things in life just seem to land in your path, for better or worse? What makes the Codex Gigas so dangerous isn't just its age, size, or sinister legend, it's the feeling that it has an agenda. Normal books can be translated, studied, and neatly catalogued. But this one, it resists. Pages that should fade remain crisp. Legends that should be forgotten keep finding their way back into conversation. It's almost as if the Devil's Bible is working to keep its own memory alive. And honestly, if a book can fight to survive, what else is it capable of? I've met people who dismiss these stories as nothing but medieval drama, the kind of exaggerated tales scribes use to keep their patrons interested. But then I've seen the look in the eyes of those who've been near the manuscript, wide, alert, like someone just whispered their deepest secret. It's the same look you see on someone who's had a brush with something they can't rationalize. That's the subtle genius of the most cursed book in history. It doesn't have to convince you, it just makes you feel. And maybe that's the real enigma here. What if the Codex Gigas isn't dangerous because of what's written in it, but because of what it draws out of you? What if the words are just bait, and the real trap is the reflection it shows back? That's the question you can't quite shake off once you've heard its name. And the more you think about it, the more you'll want to know how this impossible book came to be in the first place. The story begins in a monastery where silence was sacred and the walls seemed to breathe with the weight of centuries. A Benedictine monk, condemned to death for breaking his vows, found himself with only one hope: to promise something so extraordinary that his life might be spared. That promise was the Codex Gigas, the largest book the world had ever seen, a cursed medieval manuscript so ambitious it bordered on the impossible. And here's the catch: he vowed to complete it in a single night. Even today, just imagining that feat feels unreal. How could one man produce an entire forbidden medieval book in hours, especially one bound in what some whisper is human skin? Midnight came, and with it the kind of silence that feels like it's listening. The monk, desperate and hollowed out by fear, began his work. But as the night deepened, despair set in. He knew the task was beyond human hands. That's when, according to legend, the air shifted, and a figure appeared, a figure with eyes like burning coals. This was no ordinary visitor. This was the moment the Devil's Bible was said to be born. A pact was struck, not in words alone, but in intent. Have you ever made a choice you knew would cost you something you couldn't get back? That's the weight we're talking about here. The idea of a deal with the devil isn't just folklore. It's a metaphor for those moments when the cost of success outweighs the gain. In this story, the monk's bargain was the creation of the Devil's Codex, a darkest book ever written that would outlive kingdoms and empires. The devil, as the tale goes, didn't just give him speed, he gave him perfection. Every letter was uniform, every line flawless, as if no human fatigue had touched it. The result wasn't just a manuscript, it was an artifact that felt designed, not written. Think about it. In medieval times, creating even a small book could take years of painstaking labor. Yet here was a mysterious medieval manuscript, hundreds of pages long, completed overnight. Some historians argue it's impossible without supernatural help. Others say the legend is simply a moral tale meant to warn monks against ambition. But here's the interesting thing. No one can fully explain how the handwriting stays perfectly consistent from the first page to the last. Not one slip, not one variation in pressure or ink flow. The pact's price, according to the darker versions of the legend, wasn't paid immediately. The monk lived on, perhaps even revered for his miraculous work. But some say he carried a shadow with him until his final breath. Imagine achieving your life's greatest work, but knowing you didn't do it alone, and that your partner in the process might one day collect. That's the kind of thought that can keep a person awake at night. And if you've ever wondered why the book bound in human skin feels so personal, maybe it's because a piece of the author's fate is stitched right into it. Stories like this survive because they resonate with something deeper than curiosity. They speak to the part of us that knows shortcuts often come with strings attached. The medieval occult book wasn't just a record of scripture and strange knowledge. It was a living testament to the cost of desperation. And just as we're drawn to tales of forbidden treasure, we're drawn to the idea of knowledge gained too easily, with a bill that comes due when you least expect it. And here's where the real unease begins, because if the Codex Gigas truly was born from a midnight pact, then the next question isn't just about who wrote it. It's about what exactly was written in it, and why such words needed a price this high. That's where things start to get even stranger. When you first see the Codex Gigas in person, it's the sheer scale that hits you. Nearly a meter tall, weighing over 160 pounds, this cursed medieval manuscript doesn't just sit on a shelf, it dominates any space it occupies. Calling it the most cursed book in history doesn't just refer to its legend, it's also about its unsettling physical presence. You don't simply pick it up, you approach it, like an altar. And the closer you get, the more you realize that this is not the work of a tired scribe, scratching away in some candlelit corner. It feels engineered. The book, bound in human skin, as some claim, has a strange symmetry. Each page is flawless, the script so uniform that even experts struggle to believe it was done by one hand. Every letter looks as if it was drawn with the same pressure, the same rhythm, over hundreds of pages. That's not just skill, it borders on mechanical perfection. And in the Middle Ages, that kind of precision was unheard of. It's why many see the Devil's Codex not just as a book, but as a kind of architectural blueprint written in ink instead of stone. Have you ever been inside a cathedral and felt the weight of the design itself? How every curve, every arch seems to pull your eyes towards something higher. The mysterious medieval manuscript feels like that in book form. The margins, the spacing, the careful balance of light and shadow on the page, it's as if the creator wasn't just recording words, but building a spiritual structure you step into with your mind. That's why some call it a medieval occult book. It's less about the content, more about the experience of being inside it. There's also the curious fact that no corrections appear anywhere in the darkest book ever written. No smudges, no scraping away of ink, no margin notes where the scribe second-guessed himself. In an era where even the most careful monks made mistakes, this level of perfection is almost impossible. It suggests not only mastery, but an absence of human fatigue. Like the hand that wrote it never trembled, never hesitated. You can call that divine inspiration or something else entirely. Think about the rituals of building. In ancient cultures, when architects designed sacred spaces, they often aligned them with the stars, the solstices, the natural flow of energy in the land. What if the forbidden medieval book was built with the same mindset? Not for the stars, but for the soul. Every proportion, every column of text, every break in the layout could be part of a hidden pattern, a code only the initiated could read. And maybe that's why it's endured. Not because of what it says, but because of what it is. There's a reason why some people who've seen the Codex Gigas up close describe it as too perfect. Perfection is unsettling. We trust things that have flaws because they feel human. When something is flawless, it feels alien, like it wasn't made for us, but merely delivered into our world. And if the Devil's Bible was delivered, then the question is, from where and by whom? And that's where the real mystery deepens, because once you start looking at its design, not as decoration, but as intention, you begin to realize that this might not be a book at all, but a device. And if that's true, then the next step is to ask what this device was built to do, and why its creator wanted it to survive for centuries. The Codex Gigas isn't strange just because of its size or legend. It's strange because of what's inside. Open its pages, and you're not met with a single narrative or a focused subject. Instead, you find the Bible, sitting beside medical treatises, exorcism rituals, penitential codes, even a calendar of saints. And then there it is, an enormous, unsettling portrait of the devil himself. This cursed medieval manuscript isn't a tidy volume. It's a collision of worlds that, by all logic, shouldn't share the same space. It's like finding a sacred hymn carved into the same stone as an executioner's confession. Historians call it a mysterious medieval manuscript because its composition makes no sense by traditional standards. Why would a monk or anyone decide to fuse holy scripture with a medieval occult book filled with forbidden knowledge? Some suggest it was meant as a total knowledge compendium for the monastery, but that feels too neat. Others believe the mixture itself was the point, that the darkest book ever written was designed to hold both light and shadow, creating a balance, or perhaps a tension, that was intentional. Imagine if your bookshelf had your grandmother's Bible, a modern pharmacology textbook, and a grim handwritten manual on summoning spirits, all bound together in one massive volume. That's the forbidden medieval book we're talking about. And if this was the work of a single mind, then that mind wasn't just compiling knowledge. It was weaving a statement about the nature of truth itself, that sacred and profane aren't opposites, but threads in the same cloth. The inclusion of medical texts adds another layer of curiosity. They detail treatments, diagnoses, and herbal remedies that were advanced for the time. This wasn't just superstition, it was practical, applicable knowledge. It's as if the devil's Bible wanted to heal as much as it wanted to haunt. Can you imagine reading a psalm for spiritual comfort on one page, then turning to the next for instructions on how to treat a fever with mint and sage? The juxtaposition isn't just odd, it's jarring. Then there's the penitential codes, lists of sins and their corresponding penances. They read like moral mathematics. Do this wrong, and here's your price. It's almost as if the book bound in human skin was part manual for salvation, part warning for damnation. And sitting right in the middle of it all, almost daring you to turn the page, is that massive devil portrait, staring back as if to say, I'm part of this story too. This isn't the way medieval manuscripts were supposed to be made. They had order, hierarchy, and purpose. The most cursed book in history ignores that entirely, instead placing scripture, science, and sorcery side by side. It's as though it's saying, truth doesn't care about your categories, and for anyone raised to believe that holy and unholy must never mix, that's deeply unsettling. And that's exactly where the intrigue sharpens. Because if the Codex Gigas was built to blend worlds that should never touch, then the devil's image isn't just an illustration. It might be the keystone holding the entire work's purpose together, which leads us directly to the next mystery, the portrait itself. Turn the page, and suddenly there he is, towering, grinning, impossible to ignore. The portrait of the devil in the Codex Gigas isn't a small flourish in the corner. It's a full-page, dominating image that feels like it's staring straight through you. For a cursed medieval manuscript, this is more than dramatic effect. It's a declaration. Most medieval art depicting Satan shows him as a background figure, an afterthought to the glory of heaven. But here, in the most cursed book in history, he's front and center, alone, taking up as much space as the laws of God themselves. Art historians debate its meaning endlessly. Was it merely a warning, a symbolic reminder of sin and temptation? Or was it a signature, an emblem of ownership, as if the devil's codex itself was claiming the work? The unsettling thing is that the image doesn't follow the medieval artistic norms for demons. It's not chaotic or grotesque in the usual way. Instead, it's almost composed, contained. That controlled menace is exactly what makes it disturbing. If you've ever had someone look at you with a smile that didn't reach their eyes, you know the feeling this illustration gives. It's not screaming at you, it's waiting waiting for you to make the first move. That's what makes it feel like more than ink on parchment. Some even believe this page is a seal, binding whatever pact the monk made when creating this forbidden medieval book. If that's the case, then turning the page might feel less like reading and more like opening a door. What's even stranger is its placement. The devil's portrait sits in the middle of the manuscript, almost as a hinge between the sacred and the profane texts. On one side, scripture and prayers. On the other, spells, remedies, and penitential codes. It's as if this darkest book ever written deliberately placed him as the gatekeeper, deciding which knowledge you take with you when you pass. And if you believe symbols have power, that's a detail you can't ignore. Think about it. How often do we see warning signs disguised as invitations? It's like the "Enter if you dare" written above a carnival ride. You know it's meant to scare you, but it also makes you want to step closer. The portrait in the book bound in human skin works the same way. You could look away, skip the page, pretend it's just decoration, but most people don't. They stare, they study, and maybe that's the real purpose, to get you to acknowledge him. There's also an odd artistic choice. The devil here has no background, just blank parchment. No hellfire, no tortured souls, no battlefield between good and evil. Just him, isolated, as if the world around him doesn't exist. That starkness pulls your focus entirely to the figure itself, almost like a portrait you'd hang in a home, if you were the kind of person who'd do that. And maybe, in some strange way, the mysterious medieval manuscript is daring you to imagine exactly that. And that brings us to the bigger question. If this portrait is a seal or a key, then what exactly is it unlocking or keeping locked in? Because the next part of the Codex's story might explain why, despite its fearsome reputation, it was never destroyed. If the Codex Gigas is truly the most cursed book in history, you'd think someone would have tried to burn it, bury it, or tear it apart. And yet, across nearly 8 centuries, no one has. Fires have gutted monasteries around it. Wars have raged through kingdoms that housed it. Libraries have been looted and destroyed, but the cursed medieval manuscript survives, again and again. It's as if something ensures it always slips away from harm, landing safely in new hands before the flames can touch it. The official histories say it's simply because it's a priceless artifact, a marvel of medieval craftsmanship. But there's another theory, that destroying the forbidden medieval book wouldn't end its influence. It might release it. Think about certain legends surrounding cursed objects, where breaking them only scatters the curse instead of ending it. Maybe the Devil's Bible isn't preserved out of reverence, but out of caution, as if generations of custodians silently agreed, better to keep it contained. Its journey is almost suspiciously lucky. When the Swedish army looted Prague in 1648, they took the book bound in human skin as a prize of war. Yet instead of being sold or dismantled, it was placed in the royal library, protected as if it were a crown jewel. Even when lightning struck the building in 1697, causing a massive fire, the Codex was rescued, thrown out of a window to save it. A librarian broke his legs in the fall, but the book survived with only minor damage. If that sounds like a scene from a film, it's because it almost feels scripted. Here's the eerie part. Every time the mysterious medieval manuscript changes hands, it seems to find itself in the possession of someone who values it too much to destroy it. Monks, kings, generals, archivists, it doesn't matter who, they all keep it. That kind of consistency over centuries isn't just coincidence, it's pattern. And in stories about cursed objects, patterns are rarely accidental. Some have suggested that the darkest book ever written carries with it a sense of guardianship, but not for the owner, for itself. It ensures its own survival by influencing those who possess it, subtly, quietly. Maybe through fascination, maybe through fear. Have you ever owned something you couldn't bring yourself to throw away, even when you had no real use for it? That's how people describe the pull of the Codex. There's also the possibility that destroying the medieval occult book is physically harder than it sounds. The parchment, made from hundreds of animal skins, is unusually durable. The binding, if the legends about human skin are true, wouldn't burn easily. And with its immense size and weight, it's not something you can just toss into a fire unnoticed. In a way, its sheer physicality might be part of its defense. And so it remains, moving through time as if protected by an unseen hand, or perhaps by the very figure whose portrait sits inside it, which leads to the unsettling idea that maybe the Codex is still here, not in spite of the curse, but because of it. And if that's the case, then maybe it's time to ask whether this book is simply an object or something alive. What if the Codex Gigas isn't just an object, but a presence? For centuries, people have spoken of it not as the most cursed book in history in a poetic sense, but as if it literally has awareness. The way it has survived wars, fires, and theft without vanishing feels almost intentional. Some scholars dismiss this as romanticizing the cursed medieval manuscript, but others note that its history reads less like the story of a relic and more like the biography of a traveler, always in motion, yet never truly lost. Those who've worked closely with the forbidden medieval book often speak of it in strangely personal terms. They don't say it was moved or it was stored. They say it rests, it waits, it keeps. Language slips like that aren't just habit. They suggest a subconscious acknowledgement that the Devil's Bible might be more than parchment and ink. Even skeptics admit there's an odd sensation when standing near it, a pressure in the air, like static before a storm. There are also claims that the Codex resists being copied. Photographs come out blurred, scans glitch, translations stall with missing or distorted passages. Of course, in an age where everything is digitized, that might sound like superstition, but enough archivists have mentioned technical difficulties with this book, bound in human skin to keep the whispers alive. Some even say the darkest book ever written seems to punish attempts to replicate it in full. If we take the idea further, the mysterious medieval manuscript could be seen as a container, a vessel for something, whether consciousness, memory, or an agreement sealed long ago. Think about how a ship carries cargo across an ocean. The crew changes, the passengers change, but the hull remains. What if the Codex is carrying something across the centuries, and its custodians are just temporary crew members? The unsettling part is that no one agrees on what that cargo might be. Is it the spirit of the monk who created it, the essence of the pact itself, or something older, using the medieval occult book as a kind of anchor in our world? If you've ever had the sense that a place or object was watching you, then you already understand why some people avoid looking at the Codex too long. It's also worth noting that many cultures believe names and written words can house power. If that's true, then the Codex, with its dense concentration of sacred texts, laws, and forbidden knowledge, might not just contain power, it might be power, and like any living thing, it may have instincts, self-preservation, patience, the ability to wait for the right person to open it at the right moment. And that thought leads directly into the next question, because if the Codex truly is alive in some way, then reading it might not be an act of studying history, but of making contact. And those who have felt its gaze will tell you that's when things start to follow you home. Spending time with the Codex Gigas changes people, or at least that's what those who've been near it claim. Some leave with nothing more than awe, but others carry something heavier. Nightmares are the most common, vivid, recurring dreams that feel less like imagination and more like memory. In these dreams, the most cursed book in history often appears as a doorway, a shadowed figure standing just beyond the threshold. They wake with the sensation that the dream isn't over, that they've simply been given an intermission. Archivists have reported an eerie feeling of being observed while handling the cursed medieval manuscript. Not just the kind of awareness you feel when someone's watching from across the room, but a sense that something inside the forbidden medieval book is tracking every movement, every breath. Some have even described hearing faint whispers, too soft to understand, yet too intentional to dismiss as imagination. And those whispers seem to follow them long after they've left the manuscript's presence. Psychologists might chalk this up to suggestion. You hear the legend, you see the Devil's Bible, and your mind fills in the rest. But that explanation doesn't account for cases where visitors knew nothing of its history, yet still experienced the same cold shiver, the same lingering unease. One tourist, unfamiliar with the mysterious medieval manuscript, later described a shadow standing behind me in her photographs, though the room had been empty. Spiritually, the reactions vary. Some feel a strange pull toward prayer or purification rituals afterward, as if they'd been in the presence of something profoundly unholy. Others claim the opposite, that they felt inspired, energized, even guided, as if the medieval occult book had revealed some private truth. That duality is what makes it so unsettling. It doesn't just affect one type of person in one predictable way. It adapts, like it knows where your fault lines are. Have you ever read something that felt like it was speaking directly to you, even though it was written centuries before you were born? Imagine that feeling magnified until you're no longer sure whether the thoughts in your head are yours or borrowed. That's how some describe reading the darkest book ever written. It doesn't just tell you a story, it plants one. And once planted, it's hard to uproot. The effects can last days, weeks, even years. People talk about small but strange coincidences happening after their encounter. A sudden appearance of symbols from the manuscript in random places, unexpected references to its legend in unrelated conversations, or the recurrence of certain numbers that match page counts or biblical chapters within the Codex. Whether these are true connections or just heightened perception almost doesn't matter. What matters is the sense that the book bound in human skin has left a fingerprint on their reality. And if that's the case, then maybe the real danger isn't in the act of reading the Codex at all. Maybe it's in letting it read you, and once it knows who you are, deciding whether you're worth calling back. Which brings us to the question that unsettles even the skeptics: who or what actually wrote it? The official story pins the Codex Gigas on a single Benedictine monk, desperate to save his own life. But the more you look at it, the more that version feels incomplete. The scale, the perfection, the content, none of it matches the capabilities of a lone scribe working under pressure. That's where the legend takes a darker turn, pointing to a co-author whose name you won't find in any scriptorium records: the devil himself. In that telling, the most cursed book in history isn't a solitary creation, but the outcome of a pact inked in desperation and sealed in something more binding than blood. Yet, there are other theories, ones that shift the blame or the credit elsewhere. Some historians argue that the cursed medieval manuscript might have been the work of an entire hidden order, a brotherhood with access to both sacred scripture and forbidden knowledge. If that's true, then the Devil's Bible might not be a pact with one demon, but a coordinated effort to weave light and shadow into a single medieval occult book. And in that light, the Devil's portrait could be less a signature and more a smokescreen, distracting from a truth far older than Christian demonology. Consider this. In medieval Europe, monasteries were centers of power, not just faith. They preserved knowledge, but they also censored it. What if the forbidden medieval book was an act of rebellion, a way to safeguard dangerous knowledge under the guise of scripture. By inserting biblical texts alongside spells, exorcisms, and medical treatises, the author or authors could hide heresy in plain sight. After all, who would dare destroy the Bible, even if it came bound in human skin? Some researchers even suggest that the Codex predates the monk's legend entirely. According to this fringe theory, he may have simply finished or recopied a work that was already ancient, passing it off as his own to fulfill his vow. That would mean the mysterious medieval manuscript isn't just cursed, it's a copy of something that was cursed long before his quill ever touched the page. And if that's true, then the real author might be as lost to history as the civilizations that came before. Then there's the unsettling possibility that both the lone monk legend and the hidden order theory are true. That the monk made his pact not to create the Codex from scratch, but to complete it, with guidance from something that had been waiting centuries for a willing hand. Think about it. The darkest book ever written could be a collaboration across generations, each contributor adding their own fragment to a living text that refuses to end. In the end, the authorship question may never be answered definitively. The lack of corrections, the flawless script, the improbable scope, all of it leaves us with more questions than answers. And maybe that's the point. Perhaps the book bound in human skin was designed to keep us guessing, to make us chase its origins endlessly, while its true purpose lies elsewhere. And that leads to the final, unnerving possibility. Maybe the author isn't in the past at all. Maybe the author is whoever opens it next, and in reading it, you become part of the story, which brings us to the final and most chilling idea of all. What if the Codex isn't meant to be read, but to read you? Most books wait quietly on a shelf until someone decides to open them, but the Codex Gigas feels different. The most cursed book in history gives the unsettling impression that it's not just waiting, it's watching, that when you finally touch its pages, it already knows who you are. The idea sounds absurd until you consider how many have described the same eerie feeling, that the cursed medieval manuscript is studying them, not the other way around. And if that's true, then maybe reading it is more of an initiation than an act of curiosity. Think about it. When you read a normal book, you consume information, and that's where it ends. But what if the Devil's Bible consumes something from you in return? What if the moment you turn that first page, the forbidden medieval book takes a kind of inventory, your fears, your weaknesses, your desires, and from that moment on, it knows exactly what to show you and what to hide. In that sense, the medieval occult book wouldn't just be a source of knowledge. It would be a mirror, a negotiator, maybe even a judge. Some legends claim that the book bound in human skin offers different versions of itself to different readers. A monk might see it as a theological marvel. A healer might see it as a medical treasure. A seeker of power might find it whispering things that aren't written in the ink at all. That adaptability feels almost alive, as if the Codex tailors its revelations based on what you came looking for. The danger is, of course, that it might also show you what you never wanted to find. It's here that the notion of a contract comes back into play. If the Codex can read you, then opening it might be more than accessing information. It might be agreeing to terms you don't fully understand. Have you ever clicked "I agree" on something without reading it, only to regret it later? Now imagine doing that with your soul. That's the kind of hesitation this mysterious medieval manuscript inspires in those who truly know its legend. What's even more disturbing is the thought that the darkest book ever written might not be finished. That by reading it, you're adding to it, not in ink, but in the intangible sense of shared consciousness. You become part of its living archive, your encounter stored alongside centuries of others. And maybe that's why so many people say they can still feel it long after they've left it behind. This is why, in the end, the Codex Gigas remains an enigma. It's not just a relic to be studied, and it's not just a warning from the past. It's an invitation, but like any invitation, it comes with the choice to accept or to walk away. The problem is, once you've looked it in the eye, walking away doesn't feel like the end. It feels like the beginning of something that's still unfolding. And maybe that's the real secret of the Codex. It doesn't matter how much you think you've read it. What matters is how much of you it has read and what it plans to do with that knowledge. So now you know, at least, as much as the Codex Gigas, the most cursed book ever written, bound in darkness and blood, will let you know. But knowledge like this isn't meant to sit in the back of your mind gathering dust. It's meant to be used, questioned, tested. The real question is, what will you do with it? Will you treat it as just another medieval curiosity? Or will you dig deeper into the places most people are too afraid to look? Maybe the Codex's greatest trick is convincing us it's just a book. Maybe its real power is making us see how much of our own story we've left unwritten. What would you risk to uncover the truth? How far would you go to touch something that might change you forever? You've walked through centuries of legend, whispers and shadow. Now it's your turn. Do you believe the Devil's Bible is simply ink on parchment? Or do you think it's still out there, searching for its next reader? And if it came to you, would you open it or close it and walk away? Share your thoughts below, your theories, your doubts, even your fears. And if you're ready to keep exploring the secrets they don't teach in history books, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. There's more to uncover, and some doors, once opened, never close.